Hello and welcome to our first webinar from Hamiton in association with Event Industry News. I do hope you can hear me, and I'm sure Adam will tell me if there are any issues crop up as we go along. My thanks in particular to Adam Parry, the editor of Event Industry News, for helping to get this webinar off the ground. My name is Steve Riches and I work for Hamiton, an event safety specialist company consulting around the UK. Tonight we're going to be talking about creating an event safety file, the practicalities and the reasons behind needing to put it together. Time is tight, so I shall keep the discussion around the slides short, but have created a full script for each slide which will be emailed to you along with some example forms and risk assessments. These will be sent to the email address that you've registered with. If I could just ask that you to the top of your screens now and mute your mics so that we don't get any echoes. You should be able to see the PowerPoint screen fully. Due to the slow speed of the internet at my end, I'm afraid there'll be no videos to show, as these were jumping around a bit in the test we conducted this morning, so my apologies for that. At the end of my bit, there will be time for some Q&A. If you have any questions during my talk, then please feel free to drop them into the chat box in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and I'll be able to view these at the end of the webinar. So, let's begin. The aim of tonight, a sound safety plan is not about ticking the boxes for your insurance policies, although I'm sure they are very important to you. It is not even about satisfying the needs of the health and safety rep you may have hired for your event. The safety file is a critical, fully embedded safety management system which is there to support your event and prove that you mean it when you say that the safety of everyone at the event is of paramount importance to you. A good event safety file is a tool that saves lives, and the aim of this, therefore, is to show you what you need to know so that you can start to create a good template working towards a safe and successful event. So festivals and events are usually held in a temporary environment, sometimes within a permanent venue and sometimes on a field like a blank canvas. Often they continue on an annual or biannual basis. An event is a business with a short period of intense activity. And as we know, all businesses are governed by rules. And in this case, we are looking into the rules around the safety of the people helping to deliver the event, as well as those who will be attending it. Just as in any business, you will need to have a safety policy, and this will set out the roles and responsibilities of the people managing the event, as well as detailing the methods that will be used to control the safety at the event. Good planning and organisation are key to putting on an event that is safe, enjoyable and compliant. Before we go too far, however, it must be stated that the level of detail in your planning should be proportionate to the scale of the event and the degree of the risk. In the next year, there will be some changes in legislation in the construction industry, more specifically the Construction Design and Management Regulations, or CDM as we know them, because these are currently under review. And some of those duties will bring our industry into alignment with some of the duties that are involved in the construction industry. To be clear though, there are no new liabilities here, just that there will be a need to demonstrate proper consideration and planning in the preparation of the event. We still have to understand the terminology and how this would map over to us, but having a robust plan now will reduce the impact of any changes in the future. So why do we need one? The need to plan and organise safety management is a legal requirement. The main law governing health and safety as we know at work in the UK is the Health and Safety at Work Act, as well as the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations. The most significant difference between events organisation and other work activities is the large numbers of people who aren't employed are still owed duties, and that comes under Section 3 of the Health and Safety at Work Act. This places general duties on employers, or organisers in our case, and therefore the organiser to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, that other people are not exposed to risks to their health or safety. This therefore includes people attending the events, that include volunteers and contractors. In section 4 it places a duty of those who control the work premises, and in our case we're looking there at the landlord duties or the site management duties, so not to endanger those working on a site or in a venue, including ensuring the safe means of entering and exiting either a site or a premises. There are numerous regulations other than management of health and safety at work regs and the CDM regs. You will also have to consider topics such as manual handling, work at height, the road safety regulations and so on. In addition, there are approved codes of practice, and whilst these aren't legislation, a court would take a dim view on any incident where guidance had not been considered. And of course the plan is there as evidence that you have done everything that you can do so far as is reasonably practical. A quirk of health and safety law is that you have to prove that you have done enough so far as is reasonably practical to reduce the risk of harm. If you cannot prove this, then you would be in breach of the law and by default guilty of an offence. It is therefore crucial that you prepare the safety file in such a way, with enough detail, that it is both suitable in that it identifies all key elements of the event and associated risks, and sufficient in that it details just how you are going to control those significant risks. So what guidance is out there to help before we actually look at the sort of an event safety file? There are many pieces of guidance that have come out over the years. Each has its own slant on what should be considered. In fact, there are too many to mention here. Some are older than others, but all have the same goal in mind, and this is to give the organiser best practice guidance in the preparation and delivery of your event. The primary event ones are listed here, as you can see: the purple guide, the green guide, the e-guide, and so on. The list is long, but you only need to consider the guidance which relates to the activities of your event. Then, of course, there is our sector-specific guidance and registration schemes like the PIPA scheme, a national system for ensuring that bouncy castles, inflatable slides and similar devices are safe for children to play on. MUTA, the trade association for the UK temporary structures and technical textiles, which includes marquees. And where these schemes are utilised as part of your due diligence, this process should be reflected in your overall event safety management system for the control of contractors. A safety file is not the event management plan. The safety file, or the safety plan, depending on how you want to refer to it, is everything to do with the safety of the event. It should be broken down into parts so it can be easily read and understood. In smaller events, you also find that the event safety file doubles up as the event management plan, but this isn't ideal. Yes, there may be some overlap, especially near the front of the document where it describes and headlines the event. However, the safety file does not have the production schedule, catering information, ticketing information, or indeed anything to do with the routine transport and logistics information. All these should be in the event management plan. What I'm going to share with you is one way of compiling a safety file. There is no such thing as a perfect plan, just as there's no such thing as a perfect risk assessment. But let's start by looking at how you would pull it all together. You need to set yourself a timeline and a set of objectives. Be specific about your requirements. Ensure that it can be measured. Is what you are considering actually achievable, and are your objectives for the event and for the safety file realistic? The most important thing here perhaps is that you set yourself a deadline and you stick to it. Ideally, you would be looking to get your documentation completed at least 6 weeks prior to your event. The only way to establish if the plan you write works in practice is to test it with the very same people that the plan is aimed at. These tests are important to establish if the health and safety management plan has realistic objectives and facilitates a means to review the key components of a safety file. Holding a tabletop exercise or communications exercise also allows those who are going to be working on the event to get to know each other before the day of the event. This can be very useful because in a lot of cases you won't know the people that you're going to be working with. As with all events, there are many contractors that actually help to deliver it. So let's get down to the document then. A site-specific plan will contain some sensitive information. Whether it's commercially sensitive, management sensitive, or contain more data, it is all sensitive nevertheless, and proper security around the information must be considered, as it is the requirement under the Data Protection Act. There are several options open to you as to how you communicate this sensitivity, but I would recommend the UK Government's Protect Marking Scheme for control of documents. As you will see from this, I have the document as Protect with a descriptor of management. This doesn't mean that the information is restricted, but it should be kept safe and not be issued to those outside the management remit of the event. And you'll see a picture of the front cover on the next slide, and you'll see what I mean and how that works. The event safety file, like the event management plan, takes a great deal of time and effort to produce, and in some cases organisers pay a great deal of money to have suitable event plans drawn up for them. This information is owned by the organiser, and as such you will need to have a section that clearly states this, and that the information contained within may be copyright and legally protected. This does not preclude, though, the sharing of information amongst those delivering, controlling, or having a statutory interest in the event. Very quickly, a little bit of admin. It is important that the file has a beginning, middle and an end. As you would expect, at the front of the file you should have a suitably indexed contents page. One of the things that we have put together for you and will be emailed is a contents page example of section 1 of the plan that we're going to be talking about. In fact, before we even get to the front cover, we should be clear as to what is contained within the cover. When was it written, who was it written by, and which version of the plan is current? In preparing detailed plans, I cannot stress enough the importance of version control, as there should be a significant amount of consultation within the event group to ensure that the plan is effective. The net result of this, though, is that in some cases there may be multiple sets of drafts floating around at any one time. Having an online single point of entry does slightly alleviate this problem, but it doesn't go away altogether. So let's have a look at the pre-event information. There is no set code as to what must be included in the safety file and in what order, but if you look at the inferences of section 2 and 3 of the Act and the requirements of the management of health and safety at work, the following slides demonstrate what I consider should form the contents of what would be a robust plan. One that facilitates compliance, is practical, and can be used as reference in the event of an emergency. Pre-event information should include the items listed as a starter, but also the minimum times for the submission of information to statutory authorities, details of the organiser, promoter, designers, event coordinators, power supply, contractors, and so on, whether or not any structure will be used by the public. Location of existing records and plans, especially where held by local authorities, especially for things like the utilities, gas, water and electricity. The organiser also has a responsibility to ensure before work commences on an event that there are safety arrangements for those that are going to build it, and you can see some of these inclusions that you will need to consider. And these definitely go into the security of the employees that are going to be preparing it, the no-go areas, especially around greenfield sites, and the emergency procedures for the contractors before the event medical teams actually arrive. In large events that require long periods of lead-in with large numbers of contractors, they should have a working event safety management plan also. This considers all the issues as set out above, and these are separate to the plans that could be included in the procedures employed during the event. More information in relation to pre-event information and construction will come from our colleagues in the Safety Advisory Group for Entertainment, SAGE, once we have had time to read and consult with the revision of the CDM regs. These will, I suspect, also include more emphasis on environmental issues such as land contamination, cleaning and litter management. So moving on to the then, section 1 of the health and safety management system for your event. This should contain a statement of intent as the organiser for the event, or in the case of a corporate business, a copy of the CEO's statement of intent. Most importantly at this stage, an organisational chart is needed to identify who has authority or responsibility for what and when. There are several phases to an event, and in most cases management responsibilities and accountabilities change to reflect each phase of the event. Detail of how these phases hand over from contractor to organiser and organiser to contractor for handback should also be included. Early on in the policy there must be a section of general arrangements specific to the event, and these include processes and policies relating to communication, security, medical provision, welfare for both staff and public during the event. Clear roles and responsibilities of all those involved in the event is a requirement of the regs, and this also helps with the proactive monitoring. Remember that this event safety file has to be used on the day. There's no point in having hundreds of pages if they're just going to sit on the shelf. Having a good succinct operational information near the front means it is more likely to be used. Section 1, General Arrangements, should also have general arrangements for the occupational safety of the event. This will include topics such as control of contractors, which details process of selection, managing and competency, challenging poor practice, and methods of proactive monitoring. This section will also cover other such issues such as noise, use of entertainment laser displays, smoke and special effects, manual handling, traffic management, and so on. Although there will be specific sections in relation to emergency management, it is important that it's identified here as part of the overall management of safety for the event. It doesn't need to go into any great detail or depth, but it should state what the strategic response by the event will be should it go just a little bit awry at any moment in time. So moving on then into section 2, as part of the management of health and safety at work regulations, we have to do a risk assessment of those items or activities, tasks that are significant. This is the event's general risk assessment, but before you start, you need to have a full understanding of your event. Create a list of all the activities or tasks that people are going to carry out in all phases of the event, and decide which of these need to have risk assessments. It is your event-specific risk assessment and should not be generic. Words like should and can mean that people have a choice. If you are instructing something, then it is we are doing it, or they must, and so on. The risk assessment should reflect the activities that you are going to have at the event, as well as the processes by which these activities will be achieved. You should also identify the hazards and risks of support activities, such as moving vehicles around an event site when it is open to the public. Also, use of mobility scooters or buggies. In cases where animals are used as part of the event, this should also be considered in the general risk assessment. So a general risk assessment should also consider any special risks, such as special displays, fireworks, laser safety, and so on. The HSC is a simple but effective means of completing your risk assessment. Note that you only need to record significant risks, and before someone asks, they deem these to be those that are not insignificant. Risk assessments, however, should not be written and forgotten or blindly filed away. They need to be reviewed and controls monitored. In small events or one-off events, a review may seem a tad OTT. However, if you consider that the review is just a check of the information contained and that it is still correct and effective, and you carry that out prior to the event, you will go forward with assurance that your event is at least as safe as the risk assessment states. We have uploaded an example HSC risk assessment to demonstrate this point, and you will be emailed that very shortly. The previous risk assessments we talked about can be used on any scale of an event. However, there are some that feel that there is a need to have a scale, and this is okay. However, this comes with a health warning, since there is a greater need for understanding required, especially when considering the outcomes of risk assessment and prioritization. Here you can see some of the wording used around a 5x5 system. Remember, it is occurring and subsequent injury, not the likelihood of the injury. An event may require, in fact in a lot of cases will require, further risk assessments, and these include those listed plus others like work at height, traffic management, or a noise survey, and any other specific assessments where the general risk assessment determines that this is required. In most cases, these may be compiled by the person or persons or contractors even that will be carrying out the activity. So moving on to section 3 then, we're going to talk about fire and the fire safety prevention as part of the event safety file. The fire plan and fire risk assessment is a requirement of the regulatory reform fire safety that there is a fire risk assessment for sites and venues, whether temporary or permanent. The legislation also requires you to have a fire emergency plan. This should include an evacuation plan, and if you're going to be having an event in a venue that already has a fire risk assessment, then your assessment and plan will be an adjunct to this and must be shared with the venue, just as the venue should share their fire safety information with you so that you can complete the assessment for the event. The fire risk assessment should also consider all structures involved in your event. A stage or a marquee company is not responsible for writing the fire risk assessment for the space they construct. However, they will be able to give you information about the materials and construction methods used for the space, so you can complete the fire risk assessment based on how you are going to use that space. The assessment should not only consider that space, it must also look at items such as drapes, electricity, pyro, escape routes, emergency lighting and so on. And whilst a fire risk assessment doesn't have to be an engineering marvel on paper, it must identify the hazards, risk and potential for fire as well as harm and loss due to smoke or fire. In addition to this, the file should also have a clear section that indicates the capacities of each space and how the capacity limit is going to be monitored and enforced if needed. As part of the process, each section should be detailed in terms of space, materials used, and any firefighting equipment that should also be listed. It is important that the fire plan clearly indicates who is responsible for fire safety management at the event through all the phases. And here you'll see that I've added some contents of what is in a typical fire safety plan fire risk assessment. So moving on to section 4, this section is vital to crowd safety. It should contain all the procedures that you will employ to manage crowds in an emergency situation. However, before setting out procedures, you have to be clear about what constitutes an emergency to your event and what triggers would be that will actually get you to activate any one procedure or the emergency plan as a whole. Once you are clear as to the nature of the impacts, you can set out roles and responsibilities of those who would be involved in any response, and remembering to include all the relevant agencies, probably best through the Safety Advisory Group, or SAG as we know them, and their support mechanisms such as the local authority emergency planning teams or the local resilience forums. The framework document is one that should be read and understood by all before the event. It is not the file to read in an emergency. This section will also determine the overall management of emergency escalation. Some people use colours, red, amber, green. Some people use codes in terms of words. Decide what this will look like and make sure everybody in control of the event is aware of the terminology that you are going to use. So once you have the framework, you need a set of emergency procedures. These should be set out as individual procedures based on what has been set in the emergency framework, the event risk assessment and the fire plan. Each procedure is standalone. It is the one document that someone should be able to go to as sufficient information to be able to manage the first few moments of emergency, or at least until qualified emergency responders attend. Keep this record in a location easily accessible to those that might need it, and if necessary, print it off as a standalone document and put it in event control. Do not forget, however, to record processes for contacting media or for managing media, as at times of an emergency making decisions will be pressure enough without trying to remember or decide what to say to the media. Make sure that you've got a template already created, partially complete, and have it recorded in this section so you can go to it when you need. Likewise, communicating with the public in an emergency is vital, and having pre-scripted messages already printed to avoid having to think about what to say at a time of an emergency will help you in what could be a high stress or high intensity moment. And if you look at the screen now, you can see on the right hand side a contents page of some of the things that we would have at an outdoor event with roughly about 20,000 people for the plan that we've been looking at. An emergency procedure format, the inf is as you want it to be. The SOPs on the page should be printed back to back if there's more than one page. Set out your objectives on the right hand side so that you can very quickly look to see if you're actually achieving it, and provide additional information at the bottom if that's what you need to do. These particular SOPs can be tested as part of the tabletop exercise or a scenario exercise that you might wish to run as the event planning process. The emergency information sheet, this is provided to back up section 4 and 4A, and because they are primarily management material, it is important that this information gets to the people on the ground. A simple but effective method is to create a simplified information sheet that can be given to every single person involved with the event. It doesn't matter if they're the event organizer, all the way down to the stall holders, to drivers or litter pickers. Everyone on the event site has a responsibility for safety, for their own safety, and for those around them. And this sheet actually empowers them to help when help is needed. And where a person doesn't necessarily have a radio, they can wave this yellow leaflet in the air. It won't be long before someone sees them and is able to get help to them. And at the bottom, on page 1, it also has a telephone number for event control or a significant point of contact on it. And we know most people now carry a mobile phone on them, so it gives added means of communication. So printing these on A5 back to back is probably singularly the most important piece of paper you could supply on the day of the event. Section 5, and there are only a couple more sections. You've now written everything there is to know about safety at your event. This will undoubtedly have created a need for some forms, and as you can see here, there are some listed. There are some that you may consider that are more important than others. Whatever the outcome, if you use forms, you must also have a means for filing, destroying completed ones after the event. And I've listed just a few here. You may recognize some. You may think that actually we'll put these into ours in the future. But PPE issues isn't PPE problems. PPE issues is giving out PPE and making sure that you get it back. Because we all know that high-vis vests come winging back after the event. Section 6 then, plenty of other people will be involved in delivering your event. These may include contractors that provide you with services or products. However, each major contractor will also have a plan for the day. The plan has been carefully put together for the safety of their own staff and for the event as a whole. It is important that you give this information due regard and treat it with respect. The information contained within these plans should also form part of your event safety file, as it has been compiled by the very people who will have an impact on both the normal and emergency operations of your event. So here I've just listed a few of the obvious ones. The medical plan from whoever's going to provide it, whether it's a private contractor, St John Ambulance, Red Cross, NHS or so on. They will all have an idea of how many people they're bringing, what vehicles they're bringing, where they want to be posted and so on. So you need to have that information in your document. It is also here that you may wish to store any important insurance documents for the event as evidence for all that the event, and also to show that the event has adequate insurance cover. Now, I did say that I would be very quick going through this. This is to allow you time for Q&A at the end. So I just want to say finally, as I said at the beginning, there is no such thing as a perfect plan. This, I hope, gives you an idea of what a good one might look like when complete. The core issue is this: your event plan has to be specific to the event that you are holding. It has to be proportionate to the activities and risks that will be present at your event, and that it identifies the key people involved and gives them clear responsibilities. The event safety file is not an event management plan. The safety file is embedded through the business of your event and is split into 4 key elements. And these are the general arrangement, section 1, the risk assessment, section 2, the fire safety, section 3, and emergency planning, section 4. We don't yet have the fine detail of the imminent changes to the construction, design and management regs, but you should start to add pre-event information as a matter of course. Remember to identify and describe the event in detail, what structures you will need, how this is to be coordinated, and how these will be handed over to the event when ready to use. The management of documentation, I feel, is about to become critical to the production of even the most elementary of events going forward. And if you think you're already doing this, most of what we've already discussed anyway, then any changes in legislation or guidance in the future shouldn't be that painful. I hope these few points have been of use to you, and we have got about 3 or 4 files that can be emailed to you individually, and I think Adam is going to do that for us tomorrow. So at this stage, I'd like to say thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions, then we'll be happy to take these now. And if you want to unmute your microphones, I can hear you. And somebody, Vivian from Edinburgh, yes, you'll be able to get the slides emailed to you in the morning. And they will also come with the full script. What I have discussed tonight through the slides is a shortened version of the transcript for this event. If anybody just wants to put their questions into the chat, I can actually see the text at the bottom, so I'm happy to take questions that way also. The event safety, somebody has just asked, is the event safety plan based on regulations for UK or just England? No, event safety UK-wide is based on the overall regulations of the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. And although there isn't a specific regulation for event safety, the organiser takes on the role of the employer, and the inference is that the employer has to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety and welfare of those in their employment and those not employed by them but affected by their undertaking. So does that answer the question? Chris, literature will be sent out tomorrow. If there's anything else you want in specific, can you send me an email and I'll let you have it. Specific to smaller scale events, yes, particularly on the highway. If you go onto the HSE website and you look, if you Google HSE events, on their right-hand side they've got a number of documents that you could look at. Tony, thank you for joining us all the way from the US. We will send out emails tomorrow. If you don't have anything by the end of tomorrow, can you let me know? We're using a specific venue. To what extent is the organiser responsible for fire safety? It's through, in conjunction with the venue, you need to have a conversation with the venue's fire safety officers if they have any, and the fire risk assessment of the venue will talk about the venue and the activities they do. What you are doing by carrying out the fire risk assessment for the event is adding to that so that they actually know what risks you pose with your event into their venue. So I guess in that case, the organiser it's partial responsibility. It's a joint responsibility with the venue. Chris, there is an article in the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order that talks about information sharing. If you are going into a venue, you would not be able to complete your fire risk assessment without actually getting information from the venue to help you complete it. So yes, in answer to your question, they do have to provide information about fire safety procedures. They may not necessarily show you the full fire risk assessment. They may have a method for actually providing you that information. Dean, the venue risk assessment in the safety plan, not necessarily, unless there is a significant risk that you think needs to be addressed in your plan, such as, for instance, there might be a tricky access and egress issue around winter, for instance. So if that is the case, then you would put that into your risk assessment. Well, It is now coming up to 22. I would just like to thank everybody for their input. Don't forget that at 9 o'clock tonight we'll be having Event Hour, which is on Twitter. That's hosted by Event Industry News from their blogging site. And if you'd all like to join us, I'm sure that if there are any further questions, you could ask it on there. So it's hashtag Event Hour on Twitter, and that's from 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock. Vivian, yes, one last question. How far is the event organiser held responsible for the participants' health? Well, that depends on the event, really. The organiser is ultimately accountable for the safety of the event, including marathons, and that comes down to ensuring that they have considered the design of the route, the obstacles in the route, the medical provision around the route. They are ultimately, it is their event, and they are accountable for the safety of everybody involved on it. There is a large discussion to be around forms that you can fill in I'll start again. There are issues around, do you sign a disclaimer? The disclaimer is a civil law matter. In terms of criminal law, the accountabilities lie with the organiser to ensure the health, safety and welfare of those involved in the event. Chris, yes, there will be example risk assessments written by the HSE actually and available on their website, which we're going to send over. I believe one is a pub risk assessment and the other is a nightclub risk assessment, so both looking at venue type issues. But you'll get an idea of the format and the level of information and the amount of detail that's required. If you still want any more information other than that, then please do get in touch and we'll perhaps be able to help you out. Okay guys, well thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure if we do one of these again we'll let you all know in the usual way, and hopefully we'll see some of you at Event Hour in about 20 minutes. So with that, I will end the meeting, and I'm afraid that will disconnect all of you as participants.